Hi, it's Coach Mick, and in today's quick tip, we're going to talk about the first of 5 controls of the tennis ball. Now, by controls of the tennis ball, we mean how you can manipulate the tennis ball to give you an advantage. And this is going to define what you can and can't do in certain situations. Now, the first control today we're going to talk about is depth. And depth is very important. And if you watch tennis on television, you'll see that when they show the IBM statistics, they'll show some little dots all over the court, some little tennis balls, and it shows you where the opponents are hitting from. And if you look at a side-by-side comparison of players and where they're hitting from, almost every time the player that is hitting from deeper in the court is losing or has lost that set or has lost the match. And that is what describes depth, keeping the ball as far back in the court as possible, but still obviously keeping it in play. Now, there are advantages to hitting with depth, and the first advantage of hitting with depth is that it neutralizes your opponent. By hitting the ball deep and keeping your opponent back behind the baseline, it limits what your opponent can do with the tennis ball, and that's very important for you to stay on the advantage or the offensive. The second advantage to hitting the ball deep is that it keeps your opponent away from the net. Now, when we're close to the net, our angles increase, and we have more court to hit to, and when we're pulled back behind the baseline, the angles are decreased, and it gives us less court to work with, unless we have extreme topspin, which is very difficult. So it gives us an advantage because it keeps our opponent away from the net to where they can do more damage to us. Now, the third advantage of hitting the ball deep is it cuts down the angles of your opponent. And like we said, when you're at the net, there are more angles you can work with, and when you're at the baseline, there are less angles that you can work with. And giving your opponent less angles means less running around for you. Now, the fourth advantage to hitting with depth is your opponents tend to hit a little bit weaker and shorter eventually because you keep pushing them back. So the deeper you hit the ball, the better chance you have of your opponent hitting you short balls, which you can take advantage of. And the fifth advantage to hitting with depth is that it gives you more time to recover. Now, if you imagine somebody standing at the net and you give them a volley, you're going to have to recover very quickly. But if you can keep your opponent back at the baseline or even behind the baseline, it's going to give you more time to recover for your next shot. And there's one simple formula that I use with a lot of my students when it comes to depth, and it's very easy. It's H equals D, and that stands for height equals depth. And the higher you hit the ball over the net, the deeper the ball tends to land. Also, when you hit the ball higher over the net, the ball tends to bounce higher. And that's going to put even another strain on your opponent when you hit them a deep, high ball. Well, I hope you liked today's tip. And for more tips and instruction, please go to realtennisnetwork.com.